Good evening, everyone. I am Denora Gatacho, the CEO of Do Something. So excited and so grateful that you took time out of your evening to join us for Vibe Check tonight. In case you're unfamiliar with Do Something is the largest nonprofit for young people. We fuel young people to change the world. We educate and equip them to take action on the issues that are most pressing to them, one of which you're going to hear about tonight, access to mental health. I'm so excited for Do Something and Blue Shield to be partnering to give young people a welcoming and engaging space to talk about this critically important issue of mental health. I'm proud to be the CEO of Do Something and really get deeper with this partnership with Blue Shield because it's a topic that is near and dear to the hearts of young people in Do Something's membership and Gen Z really expressing themselves as one of the loneliest generations on planet Earth right now. In case you didn't know, nearly 79% of Gen Z would say, and 71% of millennials would say that they feel lonely, compared to just half of the baby boomers. According to a recent Blue Shield study, among the top concerns for youth going back to school was worrying about academic achievement and worrying about socializing with friends. Among those young people, what we know to be true is that mental health is very important for them. Both Blue Shield and Do Something are committed to providing young people with the resources they need, not only to learn about their mental health, but also equipping them with the tools and knowledge to communicate with others about their mental health. During tonight's panel, attendees will hear from our panelists about their approaches to mental health and the mental health of those in their communities. I am so excited to have the honor and privilege to introduce tonight's moderator, my colleague, Sabrina Kinslow. Sabrina is currently the VP or Vice President of Programming Impact at Do Something. She's the first person to lead in this newly created role and department and really tasked with developing a team committed to curating long-term programming that will educate and equip young people with the tools and skills they need to be actively engaged citizens. Sabrina comes to this work having spent her life and career really dedicated to the intersection of social work and youth development. Most recently, she came from an organization called Youth Guidance, which is focused on school-based group counseling and mentoring programs that improve the social, emotional, and behavioral competencies of students in grades 7 through 12. With experience as a community advocate, relationship builder, and servant leader, Sabrina has dedicated her career to impactful work with underrepresented populations. Prior to going to Youth Guidance, Sabrina was with Youth Achievement. She launched relevant programming and champion the sustainability needs of their gender-specific initiatives. For nearly 2 decades, Sabrina has worked across multiple sectors with the common thread being a dedication to uplifting and advocating for the voices of underserved and underrepresented kids and young adults. Sabrina is a 2-time graduate of the Florida State University and a licensed master social worker. She is going to bring you an exciting and engaging conversation, and one that I hope that you will take away some fruitful lessons learned and best practices as we all grapple with how to address our mental health after 2.5 years of a global pandemic, an intersectional reckoning for equity and justice, and economic uncertainty. With that, I'll turn the mic over to Sabrina. I look forward to the conversation, and thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Denora. It is a pleasure to be joining you all here today, representing Do Something and our wonderful panel. This panel and the questions that will be forthcoming are informed by you all, our DS members and other members like you. We're truly youth voice centered, and we want to ensure that you walk away with a better understanding of mental health, greater well-being, and the skills that you need to foster communications and conversations in your community and with your peers. With that being said, I'll go through our agenda and introduce our panelists to you. We have expert panelists coming to us who will hope to foster conversation to give you everything you need to go back and have wonderful conversations with your peers. We'll start off by going over some safe space guidelines. It's absolutely important that we remember to respect others' boundaries. Consent is also important. We use pronouns and names that people ask us to use. Respecting others' identities and their backgrounds, including their pronouns and their names, are the cornerstone of what it means to have healthy conversations. We want to make sure that we're not assuming or making judgments about others' mental health or well-being. We also want to ensure confidentiality of everyone that's participating with us. All of our members that are joining us will have the opportunity to ask questions, and that will be extended with either your name or anonymously. So please feel free to join the conversation with your questions. Please be aware that your actions and your words may have unintended effects on other people and that their feelings are valid regardless of their intentions. We assume positive intent. If someone does or says something that crosses a boundary, gently let them know, but do not assume they intended to harm you. Remember, we're all learning. Take care of your own safety. If you need to step out, please feel free to do so. With that in mind, we're not providing medical advice. If at any time you feel that you need to seek professional help, there are resources available to you, and we'll speak about those during the panel conversation, as well as providing a toolkit afterwards. With that being said, I would love to introduce our panelists. First up, we have Alex Hardy, a GRITS-powered writer, mental health first aid instructor, and wellness program facilitator, a home cook, and a lupus survivor. He battles spiritual ashiness as co-founder of GetSomeJoy, a creative wellness agency that supports communities and organizations with joy-flavored experiences, trainings, and resources. Alex has facilitated literary therapy writing sessions for over 1,000 participants from over 20 countries and has written for outlets such as Ebony, CNN.com, Esquire, Food and Wine, The Root, St. Heron, and Very Smart Brothas. He does not believe in snow or Delaware. And I agree, I don't believe in snow either, although I'm originally from Jersey, so we see eye to eye. Next up, we have Jasmine Lewis, a multi-intentional artist, scholar, and vanguard of social change. Jasmine has served various communities through her work in building youth activism campaigns with Do Something, crafting social strategies to diversify the media industry, organizing regional and nationwide civic engagement events and discussions with When We All Vote, serving as a junior advisory board leader and emotional wellness advocate at Self-Made. And now, Jasmine is the founder and CEO of the multimedia storytelling movement and community Tombat, all to build a more equitable and inclusive society using various perspectives across different industries. Thank you so much for joining us. In addition, we have Dr. Hilsa Bates, a Harvard-trained pediatric and adult psychiatrist with over 20 years of experience in the diagnosis and treatment of severe mental illness and managed care. Dr. Bates has had additional training in primary care internal medicine at Yale School of Medicine. She has an integrative and holistic approach to the treatment of mental illness and completed a fellowship in integrative psychiatry in 2020. She uses tools in mindfulness, positive psychology and psychiatry, and the expressive and creative arts working with children and adults. Her podcast is called Healer, Heal Yourself, Reduce Burnout, Discover Your Creativity While You Heal Others, and deals with the intersection of art, creativity, and medicine. This fall, she will be an adjunct professor at Centenary University for the Master of Arts program in Happiness Studies with Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar. I may need to drop into that class, Dr. Bates, if that's okay. Thank you so much for joining us. And last, but certainly not least, we have Isabel Napa, an LSW MSW, a passionate therapist working in the private practice space. Isabel has served in a variety of settings as a social worker and mental health professional. Beginning her career as a AmeriCorps service member working in the Lower East Side at charter school, and then transitioning to fieldwork as a school social worker, Isabel has found a passion for working with youth and young adults. Isabel prides herself on creating safe spaces for her clients and teaching people the importance of empathy and the human experience. Isabel specializes in helping people with anxiety, depression, life changes, relationship issues, trauma, grief, and school social work issues through multiple methods, including CBT, person-centered, and solution-focused modalities. As a proud member of the LGBTQIA+ community, my apologies, Isabel is passionate about assisting clients with identity acceptance. It is through counseling that I have found peace in my own life, and this journey has inspired me to empower my clients through their own therapeutic journeys. I definitely agree with that and believe that everyone deserves access to mental health care. So thank you again for being with us today, all of you. With that being said, we are ready to kick off this conversation. So my first question is to Dr. Bates. Now, we know that over the past few years, many of us, especially young people, have dealt with mental health concerns due to COVID. Can you talk a little bit about how COVID has impacted our mental health?
Sure. I think COVID actually has impacted our mental health in that it's been very traumatic for all of us. When we were first confronted with COVID, there were a lot of unknowns, and a lot of us had to face our mortality, which is not something we had to do so much before in so many ways. We were worried about our relatives. We were worried that we could pass the virus on to other people. And it created a mass anxiety in all of us. And I think everyone became quite anxious, and some of us became very depressed. Some of us got very creative during that period of time, and actually, the ones who are more introverted actually use that time to become creative, to make things, to create art. And so it's impacted us negatively, but it's also impacted us positively. And trying to find that balance is really, what we need to do.
Thank you so much. So speaking about balance and recognizing that there were both some negative and positive impacts that came out of COVID, could you possibly elaborate on, and definitely opening it up to other panelists, what does that balance possibly look like when you're dealing with something like anxiety, and that could be coming up in school settings or in work settings and maybe not being sure how to deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's very natural for our brains to go to the negative and to always kind of seek out the negative. It's called the negativity bias. And the negativity bias is there to protect us in a way. It warns us about danger. So what we have to do really is to resort to things like gratitude journaling, remembering the things that we're grateful for, and appreciation of nature, for instance. So even though we were in this time of crisis, we saw that the air was clearer, birds were flying around more, there was more vegetation, there were a lot of positive things going on in nature. If we observe those things, we would notice that. And like I said, some people got very creative during this time. They used this time they didn't have to commute anymore. And they used that time in a more productive way. Some relationships were actually grew from this time period. So I think the balance is really looking at what are the things we can be grateful for? What are the positive things that come out of these experiences, and how can we flourish in those times, and not only look at the negative things that have happened over that period of time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I would love to also ask that question to Alex, since Get Some Joy kind of really focuses on possibly finding a bit more of that balance.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. If nothing else, this time has been an opportunity to slow down and to really be intentional about finding new and creative ways to find joy. And that's something that we have been working really hard with at Get Some Joy, with my partner Anisha and I, and our colleague of our team of wellness ambassadors, because it takes a village, and also there's no one way to get through this raggedy moment in this history, as we call it. We are isolated in new ways. People are dealing with new and compounding challenges, illnesses, disabilities, things like that, barriers to joy. And so for us, we really, find things to do that we all love to do. Everybody loves food. Who doesn't love delicious food? So we've been leaning into things like virtual cook-alongs and being able to cook, connect with your family and friends and do things like that. I also think it's been an opportunity to reevaluate what's important to us as well. As our routines have changed, our access to our coping skills and mechanisms have changed. So maybe I feel like we're seeing a lot of people leaning into things that maybe we were not giving attention to before, and also maybe focusing our attention away from things that were maybe draining us, or spaces that were not making us feel safe, or not making us feel smart and powerful and whole and funny and wanted and valuable and all of those things. So it's been a really big time of transition and reevaluation for everyone. And like I said, really getting creative in how we tap into joy and kind of redefine like what that means for us. Like somebody said, like you just said, you don't have the commute that maybe you once had, but you can find new ways to create like a fun world inside your room, in your apartment, with your family, with your community. So new ways to get through this moment for everyone.
Wonderful. And you hit on something so important that leads us into our next question. And it's finding those things that help us feel less overwhelmed, and that assist us through those transitions. I took a virtual cooking class, gained a few pounds, but then I started exercising to help relieve that stress. So with that being said, one of our Do Something members asked, how do I take care of myself when I feel overwhelmed? So maybe they don't have access to some of the virtual options, and maybe their commute was already limited because they were, on the school bus or something of that nature that wasn't far from their home. Are there any other types of ways that Do Something members can engage with their peers or with their communities to feel less overwhelmed? And
Sure.
Alex, I'll start. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Yeah, I think absolutely. So I think each of us needs to tap into like what makes sense to us, and always remember what makes you feel good, what makes you feel happy. And so I like to think that we all carry a toolkit that taps into like our specific needs, wants, joy. So for me, I know that the things that bring me joy have to do with community, food, sometimes reading. I have a playlist that I have. I say when you're in a high spirit time, when you have a lot of energy, prepare like a kit that you can, refer to. Mine has, I'm 37. I have coloring books. I have markers. I have watercolor paints. I have all those kinds of things. I have a Lego kit over here. I have things to do. I would say make sure that you're finding ways to have fun and do things that aren't always connected to work, achieving, accomplishing, meeting goals and things like that. I think that doing simple things like breathing, it may sound trite or overstated, but taking a moment to sit down. We're connected to our phones a lot of stimulation. So just taking a moment to close your computer, put your phone down, take a couple of deep breaths, touch some grass, do something that can kind of reconnect you with your body, I would say. So tap in with yourself and just think of your toolkit of things that makes you feel good, that you can refer to regardless of what's going on around you.
Thank you so much. I definitely have my coloring book sitting next to my desk. So all of our young people who think they've grown out of coloring, you never grow out of coloring. Thank you so much. So Isabel, I'm going to turn to you for our next question, and to really jumpstart the conversation around loneliness, and what it means to feel lonely and how we can deal with that. So, working in school with students, I assume, and, please correct me if I'm wrong, but even when young people, adults, were around peers, we can still feel lonely. So what are some strategies for dealing with that loneliness?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sabrina. I think, one thing I've been thinking about throughout this whole conversation is just, the impact of COVID and how it has sort of opened up this door for us to talk about mental health, and how that is a positive to come out of the pandemic. but the reality is that, we still have these symptoms as a result. And working in schools, seeing the effect of the pandemic on children and seeing an increase in anxiety and depression, it was really jarring. And I think kids feel really helpless in those moments. And so, I think we kind of talked about, but creating community and creating conversation lessens the stigma that already existed with mental health for years. And, creating those open spaces and creating that dialogue so that kids don't feel alone, that people don't feel alone. I think in the pandemic, we also learned how to, kind of keep ourselves company. And I think that is also really important, not relying so much on the company of others, doing things that bring yourself joy. I think journaling, affirmations, really educating yourself on mental health has helped me a lot in my own life. I think it's this thing that we can't see and therefore we don't understand it. Like if you broke your arm, it's an easy fix. But with mental health, it's a little broader of a topic. And so talking about it, educating yourself, learning is the best way to sort of cope with those feelings of loneliness and anxiety, because they're normal and a lot of us feel them, but it's important to understand where they come from for sure.
Thank you so much. You hit on something so important that I think we need to stop and amplify for a second, that mental health is health, although we can't necessarily see it. It's not a broken arm or a broken leg. It's not something that people traditionally think, oh, I need a doctor for, but that's not necessarily correct. Although we can't see it, it's very real. And that truly leads me into my next question. And, Jasmine, would love for you to talk a little bit about, how can young people talk to their family and friends about mental health, this thing that we can't necessarily see?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I know a lot of times people really fear being open and honest about how they feel, what emotions they're experiencing. And I feel like one of the best ways to navigate that sort of space where you can talk to your loved ones about mental health is by being vulnerable, creating a safe space for the both of you or the entire group, and making sure that you are actively listening to one another about how they feel and, listening to their experiences fully. And also, I know that mental health is so stigmatized, even though we're getting a lot more conversation, which is why we're here today. And it's so exciting that more people are being open and honest and talking about how vital mental health truly is. But at the same time, we're trying to break this stigma of mental health and that we always have to be happy, or we always have to be positive, or only show the rise from the fall aspect of resilience. But truthfully, being able to talk to your friends and family about mental health, just by starting by talking about how your day was, asking them how their day was, and saying, really, I really want to know how you're feeling today, not just the generic answer of, oh yeah, I'm good, but I want to hear from you about what you're feeling inside, and letting them know that we're all going through something. We're all experiencing our days in different ways. We have our good and bad days. We have our ups and downs, but really laying that foundation of compassion so that people are able to be vulnerable and let their emotions sort of illuminate that space that you're occupying.
Thank you so much. I would love for us to expound a little bit on something you mentioned in terms of fully listening. And this idea that, we're asking people how they're doing. And many times, I'm guilty of this, of saying, hey, how are you doing? And then someone's like, oh, I'm good. And then I just move on, right? So when we talk about fully listening and asking those questions, I would love for our panelists to expound on, how our young people, how our DS members can fully listen and answer the question, also be empowered to answer the question about how they're truly doing.
I think we have to create safe spaces, because it's hard for people to be honest if they don't feel safe. And so finding someone that you can confide in and really talk to and be honest with, I think is the first step. And sometimes that's a therapist, sometimes that's a minister, or it's a grandparent or an aunt. But finding preferably, an adult, if you're a young person, that you can really talk to is important. And then when people do come to you, that we are listening, that we allow them time to speak, that we're not interrupting them. And we're also reflecting back to them what we heard. So sometimes just saying, okay, let me see if I really understand what you're saying, and then repeating it can be really helpful. I think if people feel heard, it opens up a path for healing for both people.
Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to add to that answer? It was quite robust, Dr. Bates. So I may be taking some of that into my personal life so I can be a better listener and also better answer the question when someone asks me how I'm doing. With that being said, Isabel, I want to go back just for a second. And we had a listener question come in, and I think this is optimal time to talk a little bit more about it. If you can expand on learning about mental health, like what do you mean about learning about mental health in terms like how could a young person, how could a GS member learn more about mental health, if they're not in a place to take classes, college level classes, or, maybe have access to some of those resources that older adults may have access to?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you also touched on a point that's really important, which is the limit to access to mental health care. That is a reality of our country and of a lot of people's experiences. And so we have had to become creative, right, about how to educate ourselves and what is vital to learn and to know. I think doing a lot of reading myself, understanding the brain chemistry and, what goes on in a moment of crisis. We have a lot of studies that have been done that have evaluated, that the levels of our cortisol rise when we're experiencing crisis or anxiety. And it's a lot of things within us that we can't necessarily change or control. And so what I like to focus on a lot with my patients is to look at the things that we can control, right? Like our diet, our exercise, the amount of sleep we're getting, our work-life balance. It's a huge one, right? Analyzing these things that we do have the power to understand and to know about ourselves is actually really empowering for people. And just educating ourselves, doing your own research, looking at the symptoms of a lot of these things that people are struggling with. Because the conversation is so much bigger now, we actually can be more informed. And young people have a lot of power to, create these spaces. There's still a lot of work to be done, but this is a perfect example of, learning from people who have studied this and exposing ourselves to what is out there as much as possible.
Thank you so much. So, you talked about reading research, books. So I recently ordered The Body Keeps the Score, and I'm looking forward to reading that. I think it's so important when we talk about kind of trauma and how that affects us. I would love to know if any of you have recommendations for other books or reading materials that we can share with the folks listening in today.
Yes.
I know it's one of those questions where it's like, what's next to me on my desk?
Yes. I love sharing resources. I think, one of the best resources that we honestly have is one another, listening to our peers and, giving grace to ourselves and each other's experiences. But in terms of a book, there is a book. One thing that I think it's important to realize is that we're all experiencing this moment at the same time, as far as like the pandemic, the global changes. And so there's a book called Self-Care for Grief by, I want to say it's Neka M. Okona. It's Nneka M. Okona is her name. And it is a book that gives practical activities, reflections, things to keep in mind for people who are experiencing grief. Many of us are experiencing of all ages. And I think it's important to realize that, like, even with young people, I tell adults all the time, you were a young person, and young people have big emotions. And so it's important to acknowledge like the full range of experiences. People are losing friendships, people are losing family members, caregivers, teachers, classmates, pets. And so it gives you things like reflections you can do, how to commemorate and create new memories around this person that you've lost, how to talk about loss as well. And I'm also going to share a toolkit that I found. I don't know how to share it with people, but if you Google Parent Toolkit for Grief and Loss, there is an organization that created a really, really robust toolkit. And this is also, I don't know how many parents or caregivers are watching this, but even for young people, a very important resource for acknowledging the full range of like what happens when people experience loss. What are the emotional changes that it go, it's not just laying in bed and crying on the floor. And this, the same thing that you mentioned before about learning about mental health. You are the most connected generation, so many different ways and iterations of using technology. And I think that there's so much information out there that can educate you and explain. I think the biggest thing for young people, if you don't have access to, for example, what's it called? Teen Mental Health First Aid, which allows a school to, train their young people in recognizing signs and symptoms. But I would just say Googling, honestly, like learning about signs of depression. I mean, it sounds super basic, but what I've learned from many people is there are a lot of myths about what depression looks like, what things look like. So look for the Parent Toolkit for Grief and Loss. I think it's good for all ages. I've also heard about a book called When Breath Becomes Air, about experiencing loss, that I've heard that therapists have given to young people that they work with, that is also teenager appropriate as well. And it's about experiencing the loss of a loved one. That's something that many can, I think, experience now.
Thank you so much for all of those great resources, especially the Parent Toolkit. I'm sure actually, that we probably have some parents here with us, or some caregivers or guardians. So I definitely think that's great, especially when we're talking about kind of that generational divide or that gap, and being able to foster conversations between caregivers and young people, or kind of different generations. So thank you so much for all of those wonderful suggestions. With that being said, and kind of transitioning the conversation back to some member submitted questions, when we actually did a member assessment before planning out the panel, we wanted to ensure that this was very youth focused and young people focused, and that we were meeting them where they were at, and that our questions resonated with them. So another question that came up, and Jasmine, I would like you to enter the conversation again at this time. What can young people do to feel more connected in their community? So we talked about school a bit. We talked about, in your home with your caregivers or guardians, but what about the larger community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I feel like a lot of us that have access to internet are very lucky, because we're able to research different resources for community. There's countless organizations out there and opportunities where you can get involved with mental health, or where you can just meet new people. I know that there's an app called Geneva, and they have the concept of housing different homes about different topics. And they also filter it by ages. So I feel like that's a really good way to meet other people that may share your same interest, or to build community alongside them digitally. Also looking within the space around you. I live in Alabama, Tuscaloosa, Alabama to be exact, so there's not as many opportunities to find community, but I know as a college student, there's organizations on campus where you can meet people and build community. And in high school, I had created the DoSomething.org club as a DoSomething.org member. So I kind of built that space of community that I was seeking, that I was unable to find, which is, I feel like, a really impactful way to create community around you. When you're looking everywhere and you can't really find what you're looking for, you feel like maybe this is not really a good fit for me, building that space from the ground up. And it takes a lot of work, a lot of time, but having that ambition to do so can definitely change the lives of people around you and introduce you to people you would have never met and introduce you to new perspectives you may have never even thought about, which is also why I wanted to create a storytelling safe space that is Tomba, creating that space that I have been seeking for people to tell their stories.
Thank you so much. I love the point that you ended on in terms of you created a space, that you could not find, and encouraging other people to create spaces and, amplifying that in terms of the intersectionality of identities, right? We talk about identities and we keep them in their silos, but they intersect in many different ways. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't have access, or people who have that intersectionality don't have access to those spaces, and unfortunately have to create them for themselves, but they turn out to be just glorious spaces, right? So Alex, I want to turn it over to you so you can expound on that or add to the conversation.
Thank you. I just want to applaud Jasmine again for creating that space. I think that is such a great point, that if you don't see it, you have to create it. That goes with if it's a book that you haven't read that is not there, you have to write it. If there's a show, if there's a production. I started when I was 17 in high school, a dance company, just after watching like a Janet Jackson concert. I was like, oh, I want to do that. And so it didn't exist. There were dance classes in my town, but it didn't exist. So to that idea, create a group around, it doesn't have to be mental health specific. It could be for anything. So we had our own little group and we rented out space in the community center and would just dance for hours on the weekends and be weird together and perform and travel. And I've actually have lifelong friends that I met from that experience. So because I decided to just go down to Office Depot and print up some flyers and put them around school, and all the other little weirdos in school came out, and we were like, now we're friends for life. And so if it's not there, also, if there's an adult in your school that can help advocate for you or like ask those questions for you about getting space for you, having access to rooms, having access to resources, you really just need like one advocate sometimes to like open those doors and have those conversations on your behalf. So I thank you again, Jasmine. I love that. And use the allies and people who are there to support you. And many times just really want to be, they sometimes need to be asked for help, or they just want to, feel invited into your space. It's not always appropriate for them to like insert themselves. So sometimes the older folks want to be invited into your world sometimes.
Thank you so much for that. I wish there was a Janet Jackson like dance group when I was growing up, because I would have joined. I'm not going to show my dance moves on the Zoom because I'll be the old person in the room dancing. But thank you so much for that. And, to that point about creating safe spaces, and I definitely see the questions rolling in from our audience, and we're going to get to those and, want to focus on kind of combining two of our questions, one that is coming in currently, and then, one that a member submitted previously, and it's really about safe spaces. So, Isabel, I'm going to turn it over to you. How can we create safe spaces in our schools? And then in saying that, how can we also advocate for ourselves in those safe spaces?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. And I think young people are desperately in a lot of these schools trying to make those changes. And as with any change, it takes a lot of time, effort, support, advocacy. But just knowing that your voice is really valuable, I think is a good place to start. I think it was mentioned in my bio as part of the queer community. It's always a priority of mine to make sure that, kids feel like there's a safe space for them at schools. And I think kind of like Alex had touched on, sometimes building those clubs or, making those spaces is met with a lot of resistance, unfortunately, by people who are ignorant or uneducated. And so creating our own communities and really banding together is very empowering and, provides that space that a lot of us are looking for. And so I would say to young people, if they say no, make your own space somewhere else, because, that doesn't mean that your voice isn't valuable, that your identity isn't valuable. It's just that some people are a little behind in understanding it, and that's on them. That's not on you. So that's what I would say to that.
Thank you. Make your space. Don't back down. Create the space where it will be valued and appreciated is what I'm hearing. So thank you so much. And Alex, I saw your hand. I saw you put it down though. So did you have anything to add?
I was just gonna, just as a reminder that sometimes older people forget that they were young sometimes. So in the push to like do their job and make things happen, we forget. Not to say it's to forget the importance of the feelings, but that's just, for me, that's what happens. And life will life all over people in different ways. So it gets harder.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Bates.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, young people can also help younger people. So tutoring, finding kids that you can read to, or volunteering in some way to help younger kids, be a mentor for them, I think is a nice way to form community as well.
That is so inspiring, right? Helping those who are younger than us, no matter what age we are, we can always help someone else. And definitely kind of being able to inspire, empower, validate those who are younger than us. And maybe they want to experience some of the same challenges, right? That's the hope. At least that's my hope, and definitely why I love doing this work that we do at Do Something. So with that being said, before we hop into some more Q&A, some more questions that are coming from those who are watching and listening to us today, Dr. Bates, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about resources that are available to support the well-being of others. So, if a young person, if a DS member said, I have this friend, maybe they're having a challenging time, they're going through something, what resources are out there in the world that are available for me to help others?
Ooh, that's a tough question. It's not a simple one to answer because I think resources are so limited, right? So I would say start with you. Start with the simple things that we can do for ourselves to create better mental health. And that goes with lifestyle changes. We can pay more attention to what we eat. Our diets are extremely important when it comes to mental health. We often forget that breathing, as Alex had mentioned before, is extremely important and helpful with anxiety. And I think that there are so many simple things that we can do to help ourselves feel better that we don't often either know about or utilize. So the breath is one thing, and that could be simply just inhaling and exhaling, closing your eyes and paying attention to the breath for 3 to 10 minutes can make a huge difference. Our parasympathetic nervous system is our nervous system that helps us to relax. The sympathetic nervous system is what goes out of control. It's like the accelerator. It just speeds us up, makes us really anxious. And so we need to do things to calm ourselves down. So the more that we can help ourselves, I think, and find ourselves as a resource, that is very empowering. Things like journaling, things like gratitude journals, exercise. Exercise has been shown to be just as effective, even more effective than antidepressants. What I am very concerned about as a psychiatrist is that we are too quick to pathologize some of the things that are normal. So what I mean by that is that we're jumping too quickly to say we've got mental health issues when what we're experiencing may be normal. And so we have to really be very careful because, you know, it's oftentimes people end up getting medicated for things that they may not need medication for. And I think we need to educate ourselves and empower ourselves and take control of our bodies in a lot of different ways. Breathing, meditation, journaling, and all of the exercise and lifestyle changes, start incorporating those things into your life and see how you can empower yourself and others, helping others to do the same. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I truly believe that helps. It starts with us, right? It starts with how we're taking care of ourselves and how we feel about ourselves and how we think about ourselves. So thank you so much for that. And, you know, I would love to transition into some audience questions. And this next one is directly related to exactly what you were talking about, Dr. Bates. And this is open to anyone on the panel. But an anonymous viewer stated, sometimes when I talk about mental health issues with my friends, I worry that I might overshare or overwhelm them. At the same time, sometimes when I'm listening or trying to show support, it stresses me out. Any tips to help out this viewer? Oh, yes.
I have something that I think would be phenomenal. That I'm a mental health first aid instructor. And so one thing, what that does is we train everyone to just recognize and to respond to challenges. And one thing that I stress in every class is, like, most often you can free yourself from the responsibility of having to save someone. Most often our conversations are around listening. I think that most often the best thing you can do is to listen. And just think about how often we say, I'm okay, or I'm fine, and just stuff it down. So I think the best gift that you can give to anyone is to listen and just to be a sounding board and to receive what they're sharing without judgment, without twisting up your face, or, you know, going automatically to, well, all you need to do is, or here's what I did, or what you should have done is, because in the moment when someone is going through what feels like the worst moment in the world, they don't want to hear that. You know, they just really want someone to, like, let them know they're not alone. They're not the only one that's ever dealt with this, that they're going to be okay, or at least to give them hope for, you know, the possibility of being okay. So I think that it can be overwhelming, but I think that it can be, what I do think that is, after the share, you will feel lighter, most likely. You will feel lighter, and most people are relieved just to have someone to be able to listen to. So don't stress yourself out about overwhelming someone. Most likely, if you're sharing your vulnerable moment with someone, this is someone you can trust, someone who does have your best interests in heart, someone who does want to see you do well, to thrive, to survive. So, you know, if you're unburdening yourself to someone who cares about you, they want to see you be okay. And I think that they would be more upset if something happened to you and they didn't get a chance to support you. So I think that give people around you the chance to help you is something that, a lesson that I had to learn a long time ago. Let your friends be your friends. Let your family members be your family members. Whatever their role is to you, give people a chance to show up for you.
I just want to say it's important that your listening is a two-way street, because there are some friends that you may have that will want to use you as a sounding board, and they won't reciprocate. And so it's important to have that give and take in your friendships, and notice if you become the one who's constantly receiving and listening and it's not reciprocated. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, because that can be very overwhelming to some people.
Thank you. Jasmine, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just wanted to sort of add to the first part. As someone who's just now entering my 20s and having these conversations with my friends now, I've always been like a pretty private person and not really wanting to expand on how I feel and my emotions and what I'm going through. So with the problem with thinking about, oh, I might overshare, or I might tell them too much about me or overstep some boundaries, is just thinking about using that vulnerability as a tool and a pathway, because when you are open, you don't have to tell them every single detail. Like, it's okay. You can tell them to the extent that you feel comfortable of sharing. And then after that, a lot of times people will also see that as a means for them to become vulnerable with you as well. So that feeling of loneliness a lot of times is eradicated, it's gone, and you don't really feel like you overshare, but instead you'll feel validated if these are the friends that are receptive and listen to you and truly love you.
Thank you so much. So picking friends and trusted people to share with, that's a really great point. And even sometimes in that, and, something that I'll do, especially with like my older sister, right? And we talk about kind of sharing with younger folks, as the little sister, sometimes I'll go to her and, I'll ask first, be like, hey, I have something really heavy to share today. Are you in a mental place where I can share this without overwhelming you? Or when someone comes to me, I'll ask the question like, hey, I would love for you to share with me. Am I just listening to you, or am I also helping you find solutions? And I find that just asking those two questions, either way for the conversation, can also help, because then I know I'm in a safe space. Or I also know, like, Sabrina, you don't need to find solutions, and, you don't need to like list the 1 through 10 steps that need to be taken to get to the other side. It's really just allowing someone to be vulnerable and honest and in a space where they won't feel judgment. Yes, go ahead, Alex.
I just want to share something to the point we were speaking briefly about offering support and things to be a resource to someone else. So I'll just share, my mother passed away about 3 months ago in July. And the outpouring of emotion of support was overwhelming at the time, but also it was beautiful in that the ways people showed up for me. So I will just share something that was helpful after experiencing that, with lots of people reaching out to you and lots of people, trying to offer support to you. One thing that was most helpful is when, instead of, you have a friend who has experienced something upsetting, traumatic, a big loss, a breakup, something that they're upset about, instead of saying, well, I'll just say for me, the person didn't say, what can I do? They said, can I do? And then they listed like 3 things that they knew, like, based on their capacity and what they were able to do. I wasn't eating enough. I wasn't drinking enough water. I wasn't taking care of myself. So they asked me things like, can I send you a meal? Can I, just sit on the phone with you and we just like laugh or whatever? Or can I, give you some money to go to the barbershop because I look like a werewolf and hadn't shaved in a month, So the person who you're supporting, what kind of person they are. Maybe you have an idea what makes them feel good. I would say often think about what you might need in that situation, or any time that your friend or someone who you are supporting is going through something devastating. So if there are a few things you can do, you can't wipe away their problems, but maybe you can get them their favorite meal. Maybe you can get them, watch a movie that you all love together, watch your favorite cartoon. How about we XYZ? Because when someone is overwhelmed, it may be hard to think about something specific that I need. So I would just say lead with your relationship with this person and maybe offer things as a way of support that based on what you know about them and what may make them feel good.
Thank you so much for that. And I also think about, to that point, in providing some suggestions of how we can help. Maybe if you're not as familiar with someone, right, but you recognize that something's going on, or you have information to suggest that there is a challenging experience, if you're in school, something like, hey, can I sit with you at lunch today? Or, hey, we're in the same class together. I see that, maybe you're going through something I don't know. Maybe I can help take notes and we can study for the next test together. So thank you so much, Alex, for hitting on that, like finding ways to support versus that open-ended question. When you're in the fog, sometimes you just don't know what you need. So thank you. So we have another question from those who are listening and watching with us today. And, this is a doozy, but it's extremely important. How can I tell the difference between being sad versus being depressed, or the difference between being anxious versus being lonely? And again, opening that up to our panel.
I can speak on this one, but I also might need your help, Dr. Bates, because you're a professional.
Yeah.
I think, we have to take a look at the amount of time you've been experiencing these symptoms and how severe they are, right? Because we all have moments of sadness. And I know, Dr. Bates, you touched on that, and just how important it is to recognize that a lot of this is normal. And these are human emotions that we are meant to feel. But I think, again, educating yourself is very important because there is a difference. And I think a lot of people throw out the word, oh, I'm depressed, or oh, I'm anxious. And, we forgot exactly what the definition is behind those. So I would say take an inventory on your life, your daily life. Is this something that is affecting you every day? Are you not able to function, in the things that you were able to function in before? Is it something that's really impacting you in a way that prevents you from living your life to the fullest? I would say that is the way to determine. But Dr. Bates, I would like you to also add.
Yeah, sure. Well, the difference in terms of sadness, we all feel sad from time to time. We all experience sadness and loss, and it's normal. And if you lose a parent, that is a significant loss. And sometimes people expect you to just, snap out of it and feel better. And maybe, it's 6 months down the line and you're still feeling sad. Some of that's normal, and we have to normalize it. It's, this is a very severe loss that you've experienced. And it's not necessarily depression, but I think that there are things that you can do, such as talk to someone, get a therapist, somebody you can talk to about it. Depression is a great masquerader, which means that there are a lot of times that you can look depressed, but then you've got a physical ailment. For those young women who maybe have heavy periods every month, you can become severely anemic, and anemia can look like depression. And you can take antidepressants and you still won't feel better unless the anemia is addressed. So that's the reason you would go to a psychiatrist, is because a psychiatrist like me would look for all of the medical issues that you could have that could be masquerading as depression: thyroid illness, autoimmune diseases, cancer. There are multiple things that look like depression. So that's one thing, is we have to figure out, is this a physical ailment that's masquerading as depression, or is this truly depression? And the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, is what most psychiatrists use, or psychologists as well, in order to diagnose people with depression. And usually there is a sense of hopelessness, and at least I think the criteria is more than 2 weeks of feeling this consistently. And also your level of functioning is significantly decreased as well. So there are people who are burnt out from work, let's say, or even school, and they think that they're depressed. But if you took them out of school or took them out of that work environment and you sent them off to the Caribbean, they're happy again. That is not depression. That is a reaction to your current environment, which may be causing you to be very stressed or burnt out. Depression is something that even if I put you in the Caribbean and I gave you $1 million, you're still going to feel crappy and you're still not going to be able to get off that couch. you're going to be physically and mentally depleted. So what I'm saying to you is not that easy to decipher, but it's usually something that lingers regardless of your environment and all the things that are happening around you. And then we could go on another tangent and talk about ways in which to treat it, medications. And I think that one has to be very careful about what medications are prescribed to you, and always do research in terms of what the side effects are, and make sure that you are on something that you are fully aware of the side effect profile of that medication, and get a second opinion too.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bates and Isabel. And I would love to go to the Caribbean right now, but that is beside
Me
the
too.
point. But what I'm hearing from that is, one, there are many different elements, many different things that actually impact how we feel. And it may not just be the feeling, right? It could be medical, it could be our environment. There are so many different things. And what's important to note is that we should be talking to someone. Don't self-diagnose, don't wear that burden on your shoulders of trying to figure it out. That's why there are professionals. That's where there are trusted people that we can talk to, and we can get their insight to help us. We're not solo. We're not in silos. As we've been talking about today, we have this great community of people and organizations that can assist us. So thank you so much for that. So we have another question coming from our audience, and this one, Jasmine, would love for you to start the conversation around this question, because it goes back to safe spaces and trusted spaces and people. So from one of our viewers, can you talk about different ways to get young people engaged with services and also feeling safe? And adding a little bit of context to that, there are some communities, especially biopic communities, that may have some distrust regarding systems that have been designed to help because of historical context, right? And we don't have to get into that this evening. But it's really important, especially when there are maybe some institutions that have beliefs that are not in alignment with healthy mental well-being or having those open conversations. So again, going back to the question, how can we get young people engaged with services where they also feel safe?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I feel like the primary way to be able to engage young people is meeting them where they are, is main thing. Second, for BIPOC communities specifically, I feel like we have to intentionally seek out these communities and make sure that they meet our needs and make sure that they are accessible to our communities, and ensuring that they're receptive to our ideas and our mindset and our experiences. And a lot of times it can be difficult to navigate finding these sort of spaces and resources where we're able to be of service and at the same time feel like we belong and feel like we're actually a part of that community. So I definitely say, whenever you're looking at these different service organizations or communities, or seeking them out, or somebody asks to recruit you, asking them what their values are, asking them what their community looks like, what it represents, asking them how do they feel like you specifically can plug in to their needs, so that it's sort of a synergy between all of you and the organization. And I definitely also say, make sure that you feel, I would say, fully comfortable whenever you're accepting a position in service. Service can be extremely draining, being a social activist, especially as a young person, because then you also have to get people to listen to you and take your ideas as something that's valid and not just something imaginative. So definitely leading with intention, being affirmative about your needs, not backing down from them, not settling for something that does not deserve you. So if that answers the question.
Thank you so much. Yes, I see your hand, Alex.
I think that you have to look inward. You know, nobody wants to engage with programming resources, experiences, even if they're the best whatever's in the world, that feel like a chore, that feel like punishment, that feel like, something obligation, the obligation. I feel like I'm going inside of an institution, inside of a prison, and, are the people in the organization, and this is a question that you ask before you even talk to the youth, are the people in the organization, do they go into their environments, their work, feeling like they're there to fix or change people, or are they there to support and uplift and like live beside and, pour into them? Are these people coming to them from a place of love? Would you want to sit through this experience that you're asking these young people to put their phone down and to come engage with? Would you want to go through that? Would you be falling asleep and, counting down the moments to it's time to be over? So put yourself in the space of like a person who has a lot of things going on. Though you may have the best intentions, honestly, you need to think beyond, whatever the bare minimums of your grant requirement, is to like keep young people engaged. So you have to really make people want to be there and engaged. Is it fun? Is there laughter? Is there joy? Do they look, are there people there who they can trust? All of those things. So start there. Do the services reflect the community? Are you in a minority or marginalized community with people who don't look like anyone who is walking through the door for services? Are you, having young people engage with people where there's a huge generational gap, where the people aren't speaking the same language, all of these things. So start there. Is your programming joyful? Is it joy infused? Would this be something that you would look forward to if you weren't contractually obligated to be there? And so I would just say start with like centering the young person's experience and making your programming enjoyable as well as beneficial, informative, and blah, 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 all the other words. So start there.
Thank you. I love that both of you came from two different perspectives, right? Recognizing that the onus is not on one side of the equation, right? Like young people, if you're listening, like ask the tough questions of the spaces that you're going to. Does this align with me? Do I want to be here? Do they value me in my identities and how I bring that, how I show up in this world? But then also on the other side, for parents and CEOs and, all of us else who are listening, who are creating these spaces, are we actually creating spaces where we are allowing young people to show up as their true selves? Are we saying, come here, be your authentic self, and we're going to meet you where you are, and we're going to create those opportunities where you feel safe? So thank you so much for those two different perspectives. We are getting close to time in terms of wanting to ensure that we're having a robust conversation, but also we have some fun things to unveil at the end of the panel conversation. I do want to hit on, there are two important questions that came in. The first is regarding the power of association. And just for those who are listening and watching, the power of association is about the people around you having an influence on you. So open this question to the full panel. What's your opinion on the power of association? Another toughie. I know they're bringing it tonight.
Well, I think you are who you surround yourself with. So, it is important to surround yourself with people who are going to uplift you. And so that's probably all I have to say about that.
It's important to be around people who are going to uplift us and help us be our authentic selves and show up that way.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that, Dr.
And
Bailey.
people you admire, so if you have a goal to be XYZ, seek out those people, seek out the people who are going after the things that you really want in your life. I do want to just say before we end that I want people to be aware of the expressive arts therapies that are out there, that, we think about therapy as being sitting in a chair across from a therapist, but there are other therapies that are much more engageable, like music therapy, drama therapy, dance therapy, and art therapy. And so if the traditional therapy situation doesn't appeal to you, do look into those aspects of therapy, because they're much more interactive and actually might be a lot more fun. So I just wanted to put that out there. There's actually poetry therapy as well. I mean, there's so much you can do outside of the traditional one-on-one therapy session.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There are so many resources and avenues to assist us with any types of challenges that we may be experiencing, right? Whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed, if we're just feeling like we need a little bit more pep in our step, right? The full range of feelings and emotions. So I definitely appreciate all of our panelists for being here with us today. And I think that's a great note to end on in terms of, we all are here for everyone who's listening in and, who is tuning in via the YouTube live stream, or if you registered for the Zoom. And there are plenty of opportunities to get involved in your community, get involved in, your educational institution, religious institution, whatever that looks like. But ultimately, what I kept referring back to in this conversation was, it starts with us. It starts with you as an individual, and really celebrating you, thinking about how you're feeling, how you're doing. And when we are able to fill our cup, then we can help fill others' cups. So thank you so much again for all of our wonderful panelists, for everyone who is tuning in. At this time, we have a few things that are going to happen. You are going to see very soon a poll that is going to pop up on your screen. Few very short questions. We want to know, how you're doing. What have you learned? We want to ensure that, again, we at Do Something continue to be youth voice centered, and we are infusing that into everything that we're doing. We are creating programming and opportunities and doing research, not only to support the young people we serve, but to stand shoulder to shoulder with you, amplifying your voices, ensuring that we are meeting you where you are, and we're creating spaces where you feel safe, there are trusted people, and you are able to really just live in this world where you feel like, everyone is circling around you and supporting you in a way that is furthering, your needs and making this world just a better place for everyone and for those to come. So take that poll. You'll see that there are instantly some results popping up with everyone taking that poll. Truly appreciate you all. Oh, they're coming in. Go ahead, continue to answer those questions. And with that being said, as we prepare to end this evening of robust, healthy conversation around mental health and mental well-being, we are unveiling a resource toolkit. We want you to further the conversation with yourself, your peers, and in your community. All of this is informed again by DS members like you. We've created this toolkit focused on prompting conversations, providing resources, and amplifying voices that can assist in advocating for equitable access to mental health services. With that being said, we'll not only be dropping the link for you all, but you can access it on our website, DoSomething.org. And again, dropping that link for you all. And then we'll also be sharing this recording after the panel ends. So again, thank you so much for coming. It's been such a pleasure. Alex, get some joy. I'm going to try to infuse joy in every day. Jasmine, thank you so much. I'm really thinking about how I can continue to create safe spaces for the people around me. Dr. Bates, we're going to have to talk about that DSM, right? Because you triggered me a little bit from my grad school days. But thank you so much for your expertise. And then Isabel, truly enjoyed how you added to the conversation, and you really came from that school perspective as well, because a lot of our members, that's the place in their life that they're at, right? Whether it's secondary or post-secondary, and being able to meet that need and finding strategies and suggestions to help them through this challenging time as we're all still working through COVID and everything else that's happening through this world. We appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in. More to come from Do Something.
I just want to say, Sabrina, you're amazing. You did an awesome job of facilitating this, and I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate that affirmation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.